Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar on the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide on Effective Advising for Post-Secondary Students. Before we get started, we want to let everyone know that we are recording the webinar so that it can be archived on IES's website. My name is Sarah Costello, and I'm a Principal Associate at Abt Associates. I am also the Project Director of the What Works Clearinghouse Post-Secondary Contract, which is funded by IES. Today, I am joined by the 6 expert panelists who developed the practice guide. Melinda Karp is founder of Phase 2 Advisory. Sarah Ackerson is a career advisor at Manchester Community College in New Hampshire. Donna Linderman is Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the City University of New York. Brett McFarland is Director of the Undergraduate Academic Advising Center for the College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the University of California, Riverside. Joe O'Shea is Dean of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Provost at Florida State University. And LaShawn Richburg-Hayes is Vice President of Education at Insight Policy Research. Our panelists will approach this topic from their various perspectives. Melinda and LaShawn as researchers, and Sarah, Donna, Brett, and Joe as practitioners. We will provide a brief overview of the practice guide and then walk through each of the recommendations. If you have questions about the individual recommendations, please use the chat function to submit questions to the host. We will do our best to get to the questions at the end. The What Works Clearinghouse provides an online repository of high-quality evidence generated by systematic reviews of existing research. Practice guides are one of the What Works Clearinghouse's flagship products that summarize findings from these reviews. Practice guides provide sets of recommendations for educators and administrators to address challenges in their classrooms, schools, and campuses. There are nearly 30 practice guides available on the What Works Clearinghouse website, covering a range of topics relevant to K-12 and post-secondary teaching and learning. This practice guide focuses on 4 evidence-based recommendations around how to design and deliver effective advising for post-secondary students. Recommendations are actionable statements for practitioners. Each recommendation in the practice guide includes examples of advising strategies and practices and how to implement them, advice on how to overcome potential obstacles, and a summary of the research evidence that supports the recommendation. The recommendations were developed by the expert panel using information generated by the What Works Clearinghouse team's systematic evidence review. The What Works Clearinghouse team screened over 18,000 studies and reviewed 165 against the Clearinghouse's rigorous standards for high-quality evidence. 37 of those studies meet What Works Clearinghouse standards. The practice guide findings reflect the intersection of the expert panel's professional opinion on best education practice and evidence gleaned from 21 of the 37 studies that meet What Works Clearinghouse standards. The remaining 16 studies meet the Clearinghouse standards but are not relevant to the recommendations in the guide. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to LaShawn to tell you a bit more about the practice guide.
Practice guide adds to the existing body of literature on advising by synthesizing the evidence from the 21 group design studies that meet the What Works Clearinghouse standards. The panel used the findings from the 21 studies along with their experience and expertise to assign a level of evidence to each recommendation, strong, moderate, or minimal. This slide shows each recommendation and the panel's strength of evidence assessment. Recommendation 1 through 3 focus on how to design or transform advising within a holistic student support model. Recommendation 4 focuses on how to engage and sustain student involvement in advising. Recommendation 1 was assigned a moderate rating, which means that there's some evidence of meeting the What Works Clearinghouse standards that the practices improve student outcomes, but there may be some ambiguity about whether that improvement is the direct result of the practices or whether the findings can be replicated with a diverse population of students. Recommendations 2, 3, and 4 was assigned a strong rating, which means that there's consistent evidence that meets What Works Clearinghouse standards and that indicates the practices improve student outcomes for a diverse population of students. We were excited to draw on such a strong evidence base for the recommendations in the practice guide. We're told that with the exception of one other practice guide on math interventions in the elementary grades, it's rare to see this many practice guide recommendations with a strong evidence rating. Recommendation 1 is supported by 8 studies, recommendation 2 by 10 studies, recommendation 3 by 12 studies, and recommendation 4 by 6 studies. The target audience for the practice guide includes staff members at community colleges, four-year institutions, and other public or private technical colleges who are responsible for designing and or delivering advising to students. This includes academic advisors, faculty advisors, deans, registrars, program directors, and other administrators, and student support staff as well, such as counselors, mentors, coaches, and tutors. Institutional leaders such as presidents and boards, local, state, and federal policymakers, funder and grant makers, and researchers will also find this guide very useful. While the majority of the studies were conducted at broad access and four-year institutions and community colleges, the panel believes that the recommendations are relevant for other institutions as well because all institutions serve students who need and would benefit from an advisor who can provide personalized, intentional advising. In addition to the 4 recommendations, when developing the practice guide, our panel also identified 4 overarching themes that cut across multiple recommendations. These themes, which are based on our judgment and experience as panelists, could provide general guidance and context for readers to consider as they engage with the recommendations. The first overarching theme is institutions must be intentional about the purpose and goals of advising and recognize that achieving these goals can require institutions to change some of their systems and practices. Adapting or adopting new approaches to post-secondary student advising can be both time and resource intensive, and it may be hard to enact all of the recommendations in the guide. However, as panelists, we believe that it's important that institutions make a sustained commitment to holistic student support that meets the varied needs of the students from their enrollment to graduation, and that institutions continually search for new ways to purposefully integrate advising services into students' college experience. The practice guide provides advice on how to get the most out of the resources that are currently available. The second theme is advisors' roles can be expanded beyond supporting student registration. Beyond helping students register for courses, advisors should be seen as someone students can go to for support throughout their college journey. This requires advisors to develop sustained, in-depth relationships with individual students, and institutions may reconsider their advising models, such as by reducing or shifting advisors' caseloads in order to foster this engagement. Another overarching theme is, given the diversity of student characteristics and needs, there is no one-size-fits-all advising model. All students, regardless of background, are likely to face academic or non-academic challenges, or both, while in college. Institutions can be proactive in their efforts to be responsive and adaptive. Knowing institutions have finite resources, our panel recognizes that institutions must also account for their own context when they consider which students or groups of students need added supports or services, such as those students who are enrolled in developmental education courses, those enrolled in majors that do not have high completion rates, those who are first-generation students, as well as those who are historically underserved. Finally, technology is best used to facilitate and enhance advising, not to replace advisors. Technology plays a role in advising. It can help advisors use real-time data to identify student needs and to make advising more efficient. It can also help advisors be cognizant of the needs of remote teaching and learning and address students. However, technology itself is not a silver bullet. While the use of technology in advising did not yield enough evidence to create a separate recommendation, our panel felt that it was important enough to acknowledge how technology has changed over time and will continue to change in the landscape of advising. I'll now turn it over to Melinda, who is our panel chair, to walk us through the 4 practice guide recommendations.
Thanks, LaShawn. Before I begin, I want to thank IES for the opportunity to serve on the panel for this important practice guide and for the opportunity to work with the other panel members over the last 2 years to look at the available research on post-secondary advising and guide and shape these recommendations. I also want to thank the Abt team for their expert guidance and all of their support as we gathered the evidence and crafted the recommendations. You were a joy to work with, and we couldn't have done it without you all, so thank you. As LaShawn said earlier, we're going to go through the recommendations, and recommendations 1 through 3 focus on how to design or transform advising within a holistic student support model. The first recommendation in the practice guide is to intentionally design and deliver comprehensive integrated advising that incorporates academic and non-academic supports to empower students to reach their educational goals. Comprehensive integrated advising refers to advising that is intentionally designed to connect students with a broad range of relevant academic and non-academic supports. Through relationship building, advisors play a key role in understanding the needs of individual students. With that understanding, advisors can then help connect students to appropriate supports so the students are better able to navigate complicated academic, financial, social, and emotional challenges and reach their goals. Comprehensive academic and non-academic student supports can be in the form of advising, counseling, tutoring and instructional support, peer and faculty mentoring, financial advising and support, and personal and career coaching. These arrays of supports can be delivered by a broad range of offices and advisors, student support staff, and faculty across campus. So this slide shows a graphic developed by Jobs for the Future that provides examples of these comprehensive supports for underprepared and non-traditional students in the following areas: academic advising, non-academic advising, career services, financial services, and social services and counseling. I want to turn to my colleagues now so that they can share their experience with shifting their college advising model to provide this comprehensive integrated type of advising support. Joe, I'm going to start with you. One of the how-to steps for recommendation 1 is to situate advising as a core function in alignment with the mission and goals of the institution. Why is this so important, and what does it look like in practice?
Thanks, Melinda. And I want to start by saying I think it's fair that all institutions of post-secondary education really have student success as a core mission and goal. And now that we have such clear evidence that advising can have significant and positive impacts, if institutions want to realize their student success goals, it really is incumbent upon them to position advising as a pillar within their broader student supports and to the educational journey of their students. Implementing the evidence-based practices that in the report that have been discussed means that advising really has to be effectively supported and recognized, and that the advising teams are part of the ongoing leadership and strategy development of institutions. This might mean new levels of collaboration between advising and other student supports, and also breaking down any administrative silos or cultures so that greater collaboration can actually happen. Institutions should, to enable that, have regular and structured opportunities for advisors and other student support professionals to come together, to collaborate. And that doesn't only help build relationships across advisors and other support professionals, but it also enables important information flows and ongoing assessment of how an institution's design of its educational support is actually meeting students' needs. And institutional leadership should also include advising leadership in the planning committees, student affairs meetings, other groups that make decisions on a college's goals and their staffing and their other priorities. And adding an advising perspective to those leadership meetings is really important because advisors work so closely with students that they're really in a privileged position to see patterns and challenges that students are facing, to elevate those issues before most others at the institution. So then they can inform their colleagues of those patterns, and that might reveal some faults in the design of an educational system and to allow for some recommended actions to surface. But to feel that level of empowerment that it's okay to innovate and share ideas on policy and approaches, advisors really have to feel heard. They have to feel valued for their contributions, and they have to have opportunities for their own professional development and their career advancement. And there should also be a shared institutional understanding of the student success metrics that advisors are impacting and their importance in achieving those metrics.
Great. Thanks. So it seems like the alignment and integration of advising require a lot of staff to be involved. So how do you go about clearly defining the roles and the responsibilities of all of those people involved in this process?
Yes, that is a great question, Belinda. Especially with finite resources, institutions really have to take a step back and look holistically at the student experience through the student experience through the institution, the processes and the ways that they can go about optimally meeting student needs. There obviously are a lot of important questions you have to ask when you're taking that assessment. What kind of student supports do we need? How are those tailored for different populations of students? In what context are the supports delivered? When does it occur in a student's post-secondary journey? How might those supports change throughout a student's journey at the institution? Who's delivering the support? What resources are available to deliver and maintain the support? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked in that part of that consideration. But once institutions really have that needs assessment done and their vision articulated, you have to implement that, obviously, and with their teams, and ensure that there's really a shared understanding of how each person supports that broader mission and that articulation. And then there's got to be training and collaboration across teams with some assessment and professional development for all of those involved. And I think it's important to recognize that we should all be open to pivot if things are not working, and have a culture of continuous improvement so that we're all moving forward together every year.
Thank you. So when developing this recommendation, our panel emphasized the importance of determining, as you sort of alluded to, what support students need, and then whether there are gaps and overlaps in the supports that are available. And we included a suggestion that institutions conduct a process mapping exercise to identify the processes and the requirements that students must complete as they progress towards graduation, and highlight the most significant processes that students interact with during their journey. While creating the map, institutions can then link all of those academic, financial, social, and emotional supports available that help the students navigate those steps, and then they can work on strengthening the supports. We also talked about how institutions need to ensure that there are connections between all of those departments and services, so that there's what we were calling this warm handoff when students are referred from office to office. Sarah, can you share some of your experiences with that mapping process? And also tell us a little bit about how advisors on your campus ensure that students are aware of and can access all of those resources and supports.
Sure. So, I think one of the most important things that we can do working towards student success is to make sure that the students actually know the resources that are available to them. And so when you're thinking about process mapping and where these resources are, making sure students know where to find them, and even more importantly, why they're important and why they're critical to student success, because college is very different than anywhere else that they've probably been. But even more importantly, it's really important that your advisors and faculty and staff are all aware of these resources as well, because you'd be surprised how many people don't know what they have on their own campuses. This is where communication, as always, is key. So listservs, portal messages to students, weekly updates, all of these things can be shared both with staff and with students. I think it's also important, as we always say in higher ed, to meet students where they are. And while it's kind of a cliche, it's true. So, use social media. I've been told that people are on TikTok these days, so maybe do that. Put flyers up where students are going to be, like put them up in the restrooms, in the parking garages. Consider marketing really like in residence halls or in the athletic facilities, or with Greek Life if you have that on campus. But even more importantly is to also put yourself in the shoes of the student when you're thinking about their experiences. So a colleague of mine had told me about training that they did at their institution where they had the advisors play the role of the student, and went through what it was like as an international student to experience essentially onboarding to their campus. So they went through the process of arrival, what it was like, when they got to campus, what move-in was like, and then what the enrollment process was like. And this really allowed everybody to see an opportunity to see any inequities, any gaps, general holes in the process, and to empower advisors to be part of that process, I think is really critical, like Joe mentioned. You can do this when planning orientation, student enrollment periods, like to high registration times, or really any other process that we think makes sense to us as higher ed administrators, but we know will probably be completely confusing to a student.
Right. Thanks, Sarah. That makes sense. When our panel was developing the practice guide recommendations and the implementation suggestions, we had a lot of conversations about what it looks like to design comprehensive advising to meet the individual needs of a diverse student population. And so I'm curious again, Sarah, can you share some of those insights with our audience?
Yeah, and this might seem very, very simple, but I think one of the easiest and free ways to do this is really to just listen. So listen to your students, listen to your staff, listen, to whomever is around. So, don't assume that just because students fall into a particular category, like first generation, that they all hold the same characteristics or needs. So listen to what they need. And then ask the questions. We always say that no question is too big or too little. And so we need to be asking the questions also. If you want to hold student panels, focus groups, give them something for participating. Everybody's time is precious. And I think it's also really important to think beyond what higher ed is telling us to focus on as a whole. So, think about the working student, someone who might need to commute to your campus during rush hour. Are your evening classes being offered late enough that a person can actually make it on time if they leave their job at 4? Are you offering courses that are required for a student's major only during the day, but you have a lot of night students? And what types of student services are you offering and that are accessible outside of your typical office hours? And can students meet with you remotely during their lunch? I'm still doing remote advising, and I talk to students on their lunch breaks all day long. And then, ask yourself, how is your campus actually working with the population that you're serving? Rather than necessarily kind of what, publications might say, like, this is the broad suggestion. Really think specifically.
Yeah, those are great points and suggestions. LaShawn, is there anything you'd like to add from your experience?
Well, I would just add to what Sarah said. I think it's important that institutions really keep equity in mind when they think about what's appropriate to offer students as a particular advising support. Sarah just gave a lot of great examples of just the diversity of the student populations and different needs. So I think it's going to be difficult for institutions to keep that diversity in mind and also think about how to provide advising at scale. It's attention, but it's attention that could potentially be mitigated through intentionality of design and integration.
Yeah, thank you for those excellent points, all three of you. I want to move us to recommendation 2. And as I mentioned earlier, advisors play a key role in understanding the needs of individual students. I think all of us so far have made that point. And that these specific needs often change as students progress through college. So it's not just about meeting the needs of students given any one of their sort of characteristics or attributes that you can see, but also a specific moment in time. And so our second recommendation is to adopt an advising model that really focuses on the development of sustained, personalized relationships with each individual student throughout their college career. This sustained relationship that's built through more frequent, intrusive, personalized, and proactive touch points can enable advisors to better address those various academic and non-academic barriers to success that each student faces, again, at different moments in time. Adopting this recommendation may require transforming the advising model at some institutions. It's going to require potentially additional resources and investments, smaller caseloads, and professional development for advisors on topics such as the appreciative advising model displayed on this side, as an example. Technology, as we said, can be useful. And in this case, things like early warning systems may be brought in to help increase efficiencies in some areas of advising. For this recommendation, I want to invite Donna and Brett to share some of the insights based on their work. And Donna, maybe we'll start with you.
Thanks, Melinda. The first how-to step for this recommendation is to meet students where they are developmentally and to recognize their individual needs. So obviously student needs will differ depending on their background, such as age, gender, race or ethnicity, their lived experience, including prior educational experience, and their long-term educational and career goals. So as a result, advising can and should vary in frequency, duration, modality, and topics discussed. When we were developing this recommendation, I thought a lot about the unique components of ASAP advisement and how that enables us to meet students where they are. So in ASAP, we establish an understanding of students' needs and goals when they're on their way in the door through a robust and individualized intake process. This really allows the advisor and the student, who will work together for up to 3 years, to get to know each other, build rapport, determine any immediate needs the students may have, both academic and non-academic, and to position the students for success, which we define as earning an associate degree within 3 years. Now, anything is on the table for discussion, from fears about taking college math, to how best to balance school with work and domestic responsibilities, questions about college organization, procedures, to resources and opportunities that are available to students on campus and through the ASAP program itself, as well as students' future career aspirations. From day one, we really want students to see their advisor as a go-to resource and a guide, if you will, who will help them unpack and plan all aspects of their college experience and to help them build confidence in their ability to realize their goals. This early engagement also establishes something that's very important in ASAP that we really emphasize, and that's the notion of mutual responsibility between the advisor and the student. So our advisors have each of their students back, and they're committed to their students' personal growth, providing timely and accurate and relevant supports and information to guide their progress. And the students are expected to also do their part, which in ASAP includes enrolling full-time, applying for financial aid each year, attending advisement sessions, going to tutoring if it's required, and participating in ASAP career development activities. So these just aren't requirements. These become commitments that advisors and students make to one another, amplifying this notion that they're in on this together, and they're partners with a shared focus on helping students realize their goals.
Thank you, Donna. Those are great strategies. The second step we talked about in the guide is to design an advising model that enables students to have a sustained relationship with their advisor, like you just described, and that advisors should really start building that relationship early on and stay engaged with each student until they meet those goals, whatever they may be. Part of this is setting each advisor up with potentially smaller caseloads to allow them to meet with students more often and for a longer period of time. Brett, I turn to you. What does this look like in practice?
Yeah, Melinda, so the ideal scenario here is where you have an advisor that's connected with students shortly after admission, and where that relationship can be sustained through graduation. So this requires a shift in thinking from a relationship that's based exclusively on major choice to one in which key milestones, benchmarks, and student learning are key factors. It requires moving from a lens of the advisor as a content expert to the advisor as a navigational expert. And to reduce caseloads, it requires that many informational functions and the content be provided in other ways that frankly can be much more effective.
Great point. Donna, in what ways do the programs you oversee enable students to have sustained relationships with their advisors?
So in both ASAP and CUNY Start, we assign students to work with one advisor. In ASAP, it's for up to 3 years. And in CUNY Start, it's for the semester-long pre-matriculation program, which is designed to help address students' identified developmental education needs. So in ASAP, advisors work with their assigned caseload of students for 2 to 3 years. They have a maximum caseload of 150 students. And students and advisors typically meet about twice a month, individually or in group settings, allowing for this early rapport I mentioned before to evolve into very, very tight relationships. Students really come to see their advisors as trusted sources who can provide guidance on any number of matters: academic, non-academic, study skills, how to speak to professors, how to balance responsibilities, and to make any referral needs. So because these tight bonds are established from day one, students are very invested in the advisement experience and begin to see this as fundamental and really a thread that runs through all aspects of their college experience. And their advisor really becomes more than just someone to interact with in a transactional manner, along the lines of what Brett said. The advisor and student relationship is very much at the heart of ASAP's success. And our students overwhelmingly credit their advisors with being essential to their success, helping them overcome obstacles, realize their goals, and to address any concerns in and out of the classroom. Now, in CUNY Start, students also work with one advisor, both individually to discuss matriculation the following semester after they finish the program, and they also interact with their advisors in the CUNY Start Student Success Seminar, which our advisors lead to help prepare students for their degree pursuits the following semester. CUNY Start students have that reduced caseload that Brett was talking about. They serve about 75 students each, and they also visit our math and our reading and writing classes to support our classroom teachers as needed. And they'll meet with students along with the teachers if there are any concerns about classroom work or anything else going on with the student, really making it clear that there's a full team supporting each student, both in and out of the classroom. And like in ASAP, CUNY Start students regularly cite the importance of this personalized relationship with their advisors as being important to their success in the program and to helping them make a successful transition into their degree programs.
So once you've built this advising model, right, that allows for this sustained student-advisor relationship, you have to make sure students can access it. So Brett, I'm curious, how do you make sure that any model is visible and accessible to students?
Yeah, so in the guide, we suggest that institutions should consider adopting flexible work hours so advisors can be available to students when they're free, such as nights and weekends, holding remote meetings through video communication tools, integrating advising into academic activities, courses, social events. These last 2 years have taught us a great deal. At UC Riverside, students have shared with us how much they appreciate both the access and the flexibility of remote appointments and drop-in sessions, and we'll certainly be continuing to enhance the availability of those options. In addition, when advisors teach first-year seminars and success courses, and when they lead learning communities, they have the opportunity to reach and impact students in new and creative ways.
Thanks, Brett. The last how-to step I'd like to highlight from this recommendation is about providing professional development opportunities for advisors, particularly to help them develop deeper and more sustained relationships with students. So can each of you share some of the successful strategies you've seen for supporting advisors in initial training and in ongoing professional development? Donna, let's start with you.
So in ASAP, our advisors go through a formal initial training process to learn our specific developmental advisement approach and to become accustomed to our data management system, which all staff use. So this initial training is led by CUNY Central Office of Academic Affairs ASAP team with the participation of seasoned partner college staff. And our partner colleges also provide local training on campus in the particulars of the college systems, practices, majors, campus resources, and they provide opportunities for new advisors to shadow and be mentored by more seasoned advisors. Ongoing professional development is offered by CUNY Academic Affairs and our college ASAP advisement supervisors based on a continuous feedback loop. I believe this was mentioned earlier by Joe, as new needs are surfaced and lessons are learned. So as we learn things, as the program progresses and students go through it, we want to make sure those are shared broadly across the system. So we're constantly evolving our training and our professional development to meet the needs of our advisors who are so critical to our students' success. CUNY Start, we operate under a co-op training model for both our teachers and our advisors. So advisors are paired, new advisors are paired with a senior CUNY Start advisor, and they'll shadow that individual for a semester and co-manage a shared caseload of about 75 students. They also receive professional development from our CUNY Academic Affairs, professional development and curriculum team, and advisors go through focused trainings on topics such as the use of questioning in advisement to encourage more holistic engagement, to improve communication, to build student sense of confidence. They also go through training on trauma-informed practices and participate in curriculum development sessions to prepare for the weekly seminars that they lead.
Yeah, and let me just add on a little bit to what Donna said. So just like our students, advisors need to be continually learning new ways to be more effective and impactful in building these crucial student relationships and in helping students to develop powerful self-directed learning behaviors. The most effective models across the country partner key training required for each position with opportunities and recognition of continued professional development. One particular series developed in partnership with Student and Academic Affairs at the University of California, Davis, entitled Developing Deeper Advising Relationships, introduces and helps advisors develop a lifelong practice of cultural humility in work with each other and with their students that really builds a foundation for more meaningful relationships, which is really the core to what we're talking about with quality academic advising.
Thanks. Thanks to you both. And I just want a quick pause at this point and remind all of our attendees, if you have questions for the panelists, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom right, this is your right, of the WebEx platform. We'll be answering those questions as best we can towards the end of the webinar. So just wanted to take a pause for that before we move into our third evidence-based recommendation, which is to use mentoring and coaching to enhance comprehensive integrated advising in ways that support students' achievement and progression. Now, the terms mentoring and coaching are sometimes used interchangeably, and both terms are different from advising and often differ from each other, but sometimes they all get a little muddled. So Sarah, can you share some insight about how we as a panel operationalize these terms within the practice guide?
I can definitely try. So basically mentoring, we discuss, essentially describes a supportive learning relationship between a student and a mentor. So mentors are usually a faculty member, possibly a student peer, or a professional who's got experience and knowledge in the student's desired field. So mentors are committed to supporting the student, sharing their own experience, offering that guidance, and serving as an informal role model to the students. So the figure that's from the practice guide that's shown on the slide displays some topics that you can talk about as peer mentors, discussion topics and prompts. Meanwhile, coaching is more of a formal and structured practice and is anchored in specific student learning or developmental goals. So coaching is becoming increasingly more professionalized with individuals that are designated as student success coaches that have specific training and go through using specialized coaching models when working with students. So along with advising, as you can most likely tell, both mentoring and coaching plays an important role in this comprehensive approach to student supports because they're focusing on moving students from where they are to where they want to be.
Keeping those definitions in mind, how would institutions go about determining whether, and if so, mentors and coaches could and should be used to enhance the supports that students currently receive at their institution?
Sure. So we talked about in recommendation 1, when institutions are intentional about identifying these gaps, they can then think about whether any of these gaps can be addressed by the use of mentors or coaches. And so if they do find that, they can craft actual specific roles for these individuals. You know, we know that budgets are tight and staffing shortages exist. And so oftentimes you can use positions such as peer mentors to help lift off some of the duties of an academic advisor. Something that's really helpful is a peer mentor can show students how to use the student information systems, how to enroll students into classes, or check their balances in their student accounts. Oftentimes, any advisor knows this, students usually have different screens than we do as advisors. And so having that student perspective can really help. You know, we've talked about how academic advisors have a multitude of responsibilities in their role. And in my experience, we have had mentors and coaches that have helped us meet the growing needs of our students. Specifically, our faculty have served as career mentors. They've helped students access research opportunities, different internship opportunities, and then also provide guidance on further education. They can often explain why it's important to take a particular course for a particular major, with that kind of like deeper insight into the program. Peer mentors can, again, also do that. They can share insights into different courses and most importantly, success strategies, ways to study for, say, calculus or something like that. And like I mentioned earlier, they can help show students how to utilize our various technology in ways that make sense to them. And in the practice guide, we also highlighted the benefits of peers helping to unmask those hidden roles in curriculum of the college. So the work of mentors and advisors can be complementary, as you can see, and the activities that they undertake with students can be structured to maximize the benefits for both. So a mentor can talk to students about how the different topics that they should bring to their academic advisor and help them prepare for that meeting. I've also seen mentors help kind of prepare students to go to faculty hours and things like that.
Joe, do you have anything else to add about the ways that mentoring or coaching are used to enhance advising on your campus? And what specifically do mentors or coaches offer that advisors don't?
Great question. And yeah, lots of examples. So at FSU, we try to offer students a real mix of support professionals, which they can have their developmental needs met. And that includes advisors and peer and alumni mentors, coaches, and more. And as we've discussed so far, they each have complementary roles. Trained peer mentors, as Sarah has mentioned, in a student major, for instance, they can make connections with peers and social networks and help them really build community within that discipline. And since the perspective is coming from a fellow student, it might resonate more than coming from a staff member. Our college life coaches at FSU, they work with our advisors to help students grow to their full potential. But our coaches have a particular intensity of relationship with our students. They meet at least every 2 weeks to establish student-driven goals, to identify issues, and to cultivate students' capacity and agency to navigate the institution. And coaches for us use different different techniques as they help students navigate various issues. And that could be from academic performance, dealing with roommate issues, or engaging on campus, building leadership skills. And our advisors just can't provide that level of intensity of support. Of course, alumni mentors in professional settings, as we've heard, that can provide a deep and different level of professional guidance and networking and more that can help inform students as they establish their educational and professional goals. And faculty members can do this particularly well for students who are interested in graduate or further education of some kind.
Got it. Thanks. Now that we've established how valuable mentoring and coaching can be as a complement to advising, can you talk about how your institutions might decide if a new mentoring or coaching program is needed, and how you decide who will deliver that mentoring or coaching on your campus? And again, Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we find is finding people who will actually fill these roles, who can find that time while they're maintaining their jobs as either faculty or students. When I worked at Mass College of Pharmacy, we were able to provide stipends to our peer mentors and our faculty coaches, as well as additional professional development opportunities. I think the money probably was the benefit there. Each week during our peer mentor meetings, we'd provide some type of training that would benefit them, both in their mentoring role, but also in the role of students. So we would talk about things like procrastination, different study strategies, or sometimes more interesting things like personality assessments, MBTI, et cetera. In my experience, and I think this will resonate with all of us, is that students want to see and learn from mentors and coaches who have similar identities and experiences to them. And they want to learn from others who have faced the same scenarios and how they overcame them. Again, at Mass College of Pharmacy, a colleague of mine launched a marketing campaign that highlighted faculty who had to overcome failure. And so for students to be able to see that their current faculty member in, say, biochemistry had the same struggles that they did to get through, but then they overcame it and became this, prestigious faculty member, that was a very powerful experience.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example. Joe, how do you decide who will deliver mentoring and coaching on your campus? And can you also talk about the compensation piece for peer mentors and coaches?
Yeah, sure. And we really want students to have several opportunities throughout their time at FSU for mentorship and coaching throughout their time as their needs evolve. And we didn't want to leave it to chance that students would find these supports or find these mentors. So we really intentionally embed the trained peer mentors and coaches in the student experience. And now actually, every new student, every first-year student at FSU has the opportunity for peer mentoring through our transition programs and courses. And since we need to provide reliable mentoring at a large scale as a big public diverse institution, we actually employ them as employees, and we do so in a way that reflects the diversity of our student body. And that pay particularly helps to offset any lost income that may occur from students not working when they are doing the mentoring. We also train them extensively, and some of them actually for an entire semester before they start in their mentorship, peer mentorship role. We have about 15 full-time student success life coaches at FSU, and we hire them, provide professional development through their time. And we actually have also a career ladder with different levels for them, 4 different levels for their advancement, just as we do for their advisors. Some campuses I know, and we're just starting to explore this, looking at peer mentors that serve in like coaching capacities, and also training professionals across campus who can certify as coaches for a small number of students. We'll do that on top of their their regular jobs on campus. We're just starting to explore those options. And of course, we have lots of faculty, alumni, and professional mentors who engage with our students through various programs and co-curricular events. And I really want to emphasize how important alumni can be in that process. For us, they have been so critical in helping provide experience and guidance to our students. And we regularly tap hundreds and some years it's thousands of alumni to give our students information, come talk to our classes, particularly our first year classes, help students network, provide experiential learning opportunities like internships at their work sites and their employers. And we typically don't pay our alumni for that kind of work. We ask for that as a contribution to the university.
Thank you.
Melinda, I'm going to jump in. If that's okay with you, we have a ton of questions that are coming through the chat, which is awesome. Are you okay if we move on to recommendation 4?
I am fine with that.
Okay.
So let's turn to recommendation 4. We do want to try and get some questions going, but we've got to get through the last recommendation because it's an important one. Because as LaShawn mentioned earlier, it's about how to get students to actually engage in advising. And again, if you build it and they don't come, you know, yeah. So recommendation 4 is to embed positive incentives in intentionally designed advising structures in order to encourage student participation and continued engagement. And really what we're arguing is that institutions should consider ways for students to engage and stay engaged with these services. But yet again, the overarching theme is this is not one size fits all, and not all students need the same type or amount of support. So Brett, I'm going to jump right to you. Can you offer some more insight into the panel's thinking behind this final recommendation?
You bet, and we'll talk real fast because we want to get those questions. That's important, I agree. So really the panel suggested institutions need to determine which students or groups of students need more support to successfully complete college, and to target those groups with incentives so that they can engage and continue to engage with comprehensive advising services. It's important for students who are on track as well to be aware of the available supports and to feel comfortable and capable accessing them if necessary. The panel really wanted to emphasize the use of positive incentives, so carrots versus sticks, in designing advising structures to engage students. So the first how-to step for this recommendation is about offering incentives for students to engage with available supports. And when we talk about incentives, many times people tend to think about financial or material incentives. However, there's a range of incentives that colleges can offer students. So incentives may be financial, such as gift cards, book vouchers, transportation passes, parking permits, food or subsidized childcare, or they may be non-financial, such as priority registration, priority meeting times with advisors, or access to additional courses at no cost. So really the key here is to identify what's possible on your campus and what are the most essential behaviors to incentivize that have the most potential to really impact your success.
Thank you. Yeah, and that second how-to step is about incentives as well, and to incentivize face-to-face advising meetings. Why is that so important? And again, what does it look like in practice?
Yeah, so while advisors can use technology to accomplish advising-related administrative tasks, the face-to-face advising meetings can really help build a stronger advisor-student relationship that will allow advisors and students to have much deeper conversations. So traditionally, students associate face-to-face advising meetings with course registration or planning. Imagine if all the course planning issues were resolved outside of the advising meeting, and the advising meeting was instead focused on a student's goals and challenges to those goals. So flipped advising, appreciative advising, strength-based advising models, those are all powerful examples that move conversations towards deeper and more meaningful relationship-based discussions.
Those are great points. When we were drafting this recommendation, we frequently revisited the importance of a student-centered approach before, during, and after all advisor-student contacts. LaShawn, can you tell our audience what we meant by that?
Sure, Melinda. So we were thinking of interweaving positive messages throughout student experiences. So weaving messages in a comprehensive, integrated advising program can contribute to all of the other things that we've been talking about. And these messages can also help students to continue to be self-motivated to engage with their advisor and engage with other student support.
I'll just add a little bit to LaShawn's comments as well on that. So specifically, I think institutions should be intentional about transforming the traditional experience of advisor as registration guru to one of advisor as success partner. And they can do this by intentionally and structurally designing advising in a couple of key ways. First, think about ways that advising can be decoupled from registration. In many ways, we train students that advising is about registration. We introduce students to the advisor at summer orientation and tell them, meet with your advisor and take what they recommend. Through technology, we can easily start these relationships before fall and have that first introduction not be about courses and registration. Second, if advising relationships center around what courses a student needs to graduate, your technology needs a boost. In 2021, no curricular path or grad requirement should be a treasure hunt. Electronically mapping curriculum, pathways, and offerings is essential to move advising away from a registration focus.
So the fourth how-to step is to consider incentives beyond advising activities to include other milestones. And so you talked a little bit before about other kinds of incentives, but we also talked a little bit about other moments of incentives. And so can you just quickly share with us a couple of those other milestones beyond registration and graduation that institutions could think about incentivizing?
Yeah, you bet, Melinda. So the panel recommends tying the incentives not only to these advisors' student outcomes, but key activities that could ensure students are successfully progressing in college. So such as utilizing tutoring services, career services, maybe it's enrolling in a minimum number of credit hours, meeting grade point average requirements. So what on your campus are the key milestones, events, and activities that align with student progress towards graduation and or career success? So for example, many campuses incentivize completing a certain number of units per term that align with timely progress. Others may incentivize various academic support programs or students or services for students who come from under-resourced districts, while others may incentivize research opportunities or internships associated with greater career outcomes. So those are a few.
That's helpful. LaShawn, is there anything else you want to add about the use of incentives?
Sure, really briefly, several of the studies that were part of the guide were based on the performance-based scholarship demonstration, which used monetary incentives in all sites. In that study, the incentives were structured to be delivered at several points to encourage engagement, as Brett just alluded to. I guess the 2 points that I would want to make is that in those studies, students seem to regard the incentive as a carrot initially, but once they were engaged and involved in the services, they understood the value of the service. So I would say to think about incentives in two ways. One, to provide them directly to students to incentivize them to engage in whatever activities. They need to be made aware that the incentive is there. So meaning if you're going to do a monetary incentive, do it in such a way it's direct and not hitting their financial aid in a way that they're not necessarily aware of it. But two, provide real value in the student support services that you're giving, because if you provide value there, they will see the value and continue to engage.
That's really great. So thank you all to all of your our panelists and for being such wonderful colleagues. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to try and sneak in at least one question maybe, but I'll let her decide as our moderator. But thank you all, colleagues and participants.
Great, thanks, Linda. So as our panelists were walking through each of the recommendations, we did get a lot of great questions in the chat. So I'm going to start with one for Brett. Have you found that required advising at various points in the student's progress is needed for engagement? We find emails, texts, phone calls often are not effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the action of proactive advising is essential, and some of what LaShawn just mentioned. You have to allow students to see the value in advising. And then once they see the value, that becomes just a natural mechanism, right? And so the reality is proactive advising is a really powerful way to be able to do that initially with students, to be able to engage them in those connections with your teams and to be able to have them see the value. So that incentive is very clear to them of why they're there and why they're having those connections.
Great, thanks. Joe, I have one here for you. Given the Great Resignation wave and higher education and students taking jobs outside of their colleges due potentially to a better pay, what are your takes on adjusting academic advisors' salaries to livable wages instead? Do you think this is something hiring managers and senior administrators should consider?
It's a great question, and the answer is yes. In fact, last week we did that at the institution, significantly raising the floor and every level. It does create some tension as you think about when you raise the salary levels of advisors, how does it affect the salary levels of all the other student support personnel? And how does that create compression or inversion issues? So it can be quite complicated for an institution to do that, but it's a necessary investment. I think the new floor is much higher than it used to be. And I think also the increasing the salary level of advisors helps to recenter and reposition advising as a distinct profession, an educational profession for which people aspire to, rather than something that's entry level and transactional in nature. So it's reinforcing all of what we said, long-term trusted relationships with committed professionals who are trained and are there for the long term. So salaries are really important to do that.
Thanks. Melinda, I have one here for you. As the restructuring is happening on college campuses, how might this information be shared in the K-12 environment so that there is somewhat of a seamless transition from one system to another?
That is a fantastic question. And I'll preface it by saying that our panel deliberately did not look at the K-12 space. So I agree that our recommendations are probably relevant, but I'm going to speak a little bit more from just personal systems thinking, not from the guide, because we bracketed the evidence. And I feel like particularly for IES, that's important to acknowledge. I do think there are a couple of opportunities. One is that sits with your dual enrollment and other K-12 partnership programs, right? So we're increasingly seeing institutions that are connecting their high school students who are taking college courses with their academic advisors on campus to streamline that information flow for the students as well as for staff across sectors. So leveraging some of those partnerships. I think the other space to do this is probably in thinking through similar conversations in K-12. What does advising mean in K-12 or counseling or guidance counseling? There are very similar challenges in that sector, particularly in high schools, where those advisors and counselors are just as overworked as ours are in higher education, and folks want to do holistic support but get pulled into either IEPs or college counseling, not a holistic ecosystem. So I also look to our IES and Abt colleagues to help us think about how we can disseminate some of this cross-sector. But for professionals in the higher ed sector, I would say starting with your K-12 partnerships is probably the most seamless and fruitful way to at least start the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Melinda. And thank you to all of our fabulous experts who joined us today. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your insights. The practice guide on effective advising for post-secondary students can be accessed through the What Works Clearinghouse website. As we mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded, and we'll send an email when the recording is available. In addition to the live webinar, we worked with the expert panelists to develop 4 on-demand webinars. We called it the Practitioner's Perspective video series. We have 1 video for each recommendation. Each video is about 45 minutes long. It features one of our expert panel members with 2 to 3 practitioners, and where they really talk about how they've implemented the recommendation at their college. So we talk about the folks who walk the walk. So anyone who registers for this webinar will also receive an email notification when those videos are available on the WWC website. To today's attendees, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all that you're doing to support post-secondary learning. I hope everyone takes care.